The Space God Memoirs. Season 3, Episode 7. I coasted through the skies of the pallid inner-world cityscape, the artificial sun above casting its muted light across the entire metropolitan scene. I kept high, watching the city's residents zoom by on their own hover disks, off to their varied duties, responsibilities, and distractions. Only hours had passed since the attack, and already things were feeling different for me. There was a lightness, as if the ennui I had been afflicted with since coming here was beginning to subside. Strange, considering I had just been on the edge of being killed. Or maybe not strange. Circumstances may have been scragged, but at least it was interesting. My mind was rushing with ideas, possible courses of action. My senses were on guard for danger. A definite step up from the isolated boredom of observation. I was flying through the interior, over the expanse of the planetoid-encompassing city, ready for the next step of my mission. Standard procedure would be for me to contact the authorities about it. I had just been attacked. Another Nayar was discorporated. Definitely crime-related stuff going down. It would be logical to inform the Overseer's office, who would send out the Nentael and clean things up. Thing was, I didn't know who was involved in this plot, how deep it went. For all I knew, the Overseer, or someone on his staff, was part of this. The culprits were using restricted Nayar tech, nanites, absorbers, holograms. If they weren't Nayar themselves, they definitely had access to Nayar systems, and were watching with a vigilant eye. I had to keep this on the subtle. Same reason I had to keep my thoughts low, stay in stealth mind, whatever. If the bad guys included other Nayar, then they might have access to security systems, cameras, and, of course, telepathy. That also presented the problem of how I was going to figure out that freaky crystal, which at that moment was stowed away inside a hidden compartment in my quarters. Whatever it actually was, the circumstances were way too suspicious for me to just take it to a lab and analyze it. The wrong folks might get alerted, just like they were probably alerted to Tabalnok's actions. But why kill him? The Nayar didn't die. We just got discorporated. The body could be destroyed, but the soul would remain. And just like I'd learned back on Aruvis, we'd soon come back in a cloned body, ready to go, provided we could pay back the Atra cost of generating it. Tabalnok was most certainly bound here on this planetoid. Maybe he was even back already, could conveniently tell me who murdered him so he could chase the Javgaggers down. So I knew my next destination. The cloning center was located within a bubble-shaped building in Kucingkecil, west of the Archon's Tower. The open floor was lined in symmetrically shaped vats of amber-colored fluids, occasionally sparkling with a yellow glow. Within floated the backup bodies of nearly every Nayar on this facility. As I walked by, I gazed at bodies large and small, shaped like mine or bearing forms more alien. The variety of the Nayar was astounding. Nearly every one of a discernibly different species. Some had even gone beyond species altogether and designed bioengineered modbods to their liking. Pretty trippy stuff if you weren't used to it, but it was starting to feel normal to me. Somewhere in this forest of vats, my own clone was waiting for the event of my demise. I didn't dwell among the cloning chambers, instead ascending a set of metal stairs near the center of the dome, which led to a raised platform overlooking it all. Here, behind a desk covered in glassy tubes and vials, sat the bioengineer, a squat orange Nayar with a wrinkly, scrunched-up face and long tusks protruding from his mouth. Kucingkecil, rank 1 awakened Nayar, displayed above his head. He stared intently at two miniature figures upon his desk, tiny, multi-legged beasts that appeared to be engaged in brutal battle. Holograms. I lowered my stealth mind a little as I approached, drawing it back into me. Enough to be noticed, but not enough to really stand out. The little fellow looked up from his distraction as I approached. "Welcome to the cloning facility, Initiate Keph," he began in a nasal tone, his eyes drifting upward to where my own ID was displayed for him. "How may I assist you?" The fighting holograms vanished. "Hey there, Kucingkecil, Coop, whatever. Not sure if we're on a friendly enough basis for nicknames yet, but we're not," he answered. "I don't think I've ever dealt with you before." "Yeah, been in here a few times, modifying my own clone and all that. I guess you don't remember me. Due to the stealth mind, he probably wouldn't." "I don't. What do you need?" "Checking up on a friend's backup, Agent Tabalnak." "Unusual. Most Nair find it simpler to track their backups via the Monad's status updates." "Yeah, well, my buddy's off station right now, looking into some possible Vaer incursions just outside the star system. In fact, he's kind of unreachable at the moment, going dark to avoid his comms getting tracked. I'm here to check if his clone's ready in case, the Vaer off him." "I see. I suppose that is a valid enough concern." Coop closed his eyes for an instant. Little blips of Atra above his head indicated he was accessing the local file system. A moment later, he looked up at me and shook his head. "Tabalnak's clone backup appears to be fully intact and ready for a consciousness upload when needed." "Ah, great," I responded. "But you haven't noticed any unusual activity with his backup lately, have you?" The little orange guy raised a wrinkly brow and sighed softly to himself. "I mean, he hasn't been uploaded into it, has he?" I asked. Kucingkecil eyed me quizzically. "Well, he was out there possibly encountering the Vaer. Hadn't heard from him in a while, and I thought that maybe..." "No. Per our records, Agent Tabalnak has not been discorporated recently. Wherever he is on his mission, he lives." "I see. That's great. Tabalnak's not dead." "Indeed. Is there anything more I can help you with? Others have arrived in the facility and will need assistance." Nope. That's all. Thanks a bunch." I tossed him a gesture of approval, though confusion was starting to set in. Tabalnak wasn't dead. Kucingkecil looked down again, the forms of the two multi-legged beasts reappearing on his desk. "See ya, Coop," I said as I turned around and headed back down the stairs. Scrag. Agent Tabalnak was alive. Well, according to the records here, he was alive, or at least he hadn't awakened in his clone body. As I walked between the various clones suspended in their amber fluids, I wondered what exactly that could mean. I'd seen his corpse, complete with his chest cavity burst open, blood everywhere, and that crystal thing growing where his heart should have been. In the past, that would have meant dead, or in this case, discorporated. Even more certain after the nanites cleaned the body up. I groaned to myself. What did life and death even mean out here among these awakened people? Why would anyone even try and kill one of the Nair when it just meant being auto-resurrected? But that wasn't happening. He wasn't back in his clone, and he wasn't alive. Something his attackers had done had stopped that from occurring. Scrag, existence was complicated out here. I was starting to yearn for my days on a farm world, where dead meant dead. Seeing several more people walking towards the stairs from the dome's entry, I reactively fell back into stealth mind. Coop would probably forget all about me. No need for more witnesses. I let out a breath, muted my thoughts, and leaned up against an unoccupied cloning vat. I briefly peeked at the new arrivals. A couple of green-robed biotechs off to their duties. Then there was Suvar, our little canid friend, this time minus his female companion. He was looking pretty casual, strolling towards the stairway I had just come down. I almost stepped out of stealth to greet Suvar, but stopped myself. Suvar seemed like a decent yug. He worked with Tabalnak directly. But, just like with everyone else here, I wasn't totally sure I could trust him. So I waited at the base of the stairs and listened a moment. Suvar ascended the stairs and began having a conversation with Coop, same as I had. And not surprisingly, they were talking about the same stuff. Just like I had, he was nudging the biotech, digging for info on whether Tabalnak's clone had been activated, and getting the same answers. Minutes later, an annoyed snarl on his face, tail lowered. I saw Suvar stomping off down the stairs, clearly perturbed at the cloner's answer. Most curious. I wondered why exactly Suvar would have reason to suspect that his boss had gotten discorporated. I had straight up seen Tabalnak's body. As far as I knew, Suvar had not, so I was a little furball here. I'd have to tail him soon just to make sure. But just as Suvar was leaving the cloning labs, another surprise visitor was arriving. Hovering in the air above the cloning vats was a tall, thin figure, their voluminous purple robes flowing behind them. Overseer Dryafar. His round head was inset with 3 glassy eyes that scanned over the chamber as he floated from end to end, silently observing the scene. His field blipped with Aychuck activity, likely telepathy, and sometimes a sigil would briefly appear over his head as he stopped and examined the various vats. He was the real administrator here, attending to day-to-day operations, while his boss Lumavari sat in his giant throne and vibed out. Dryfar looked like he was doing his job, making sure stuff ran smoothly, probably scanning the systems or the Atra levels. But something about that Triclops creeped me out. How he was always floating around and watching everything. Tabalnak had told me to keep stealthy for a reason. Had said that even the top officials here might be involved in some shady stuff. Was the Overseer part of this plot? I figured that if anyone here could get someone killed secretly, dispose of the body, and interfere with the resurrection process, it was Dryfar. He had been present when the Archon failed to awaken. Had been rather keen on just dismissing everyone and sending us on our way. That creep Savaharthas had already shown me that the Nayar higher-ups didn't always live up to their exalted virtues. Or maybe they were just willing to make some moral sacrifices for the greater good. So I stood there, keeping my thoughts low as I watched the Overseer make his rounds, floating from tank to tank, keeping his mental notes to himself. Briefly, I noticed one of his 3 eyes moving my way, lingering for an instant over the empty tank I was leaning against. A shiver ran across my skin. Had he noticed me? No. A second later and he looked away, back to his silent duties. I intensed, shaking off my discomfort. My stealth wasn't perfect, I knew, but I also knew that if I kept my thoughts low and my emotions calm, nobody who wasn't actively looking for me would notice me, not even a higher-ranking Nayar. Still, I was relieved when I stepped out of the cloning center, feeling a waft of air and the simulated sunlight on my skin. I tossed my miniaturized hover disk on the ground, and it expanded out to full size. As I stepped onto it and directed it up and forward over a circular pool surrounded by metal pillars, my mind swarmed, trying to piece together what could be happening. Someone had killed Agent Tabalnak, likely due to his discoveries. Something was also preventing him from entering his backup body. That definitely wasn't coincidence. Neither was the crystal sprouted from his heart. Without the ability to analyze that crystal and find out what it did, I might just be out of clues. But not if I got help. I took off and zoomed back towards the residential sector, to my personal quarters. I wasn't out of resources just yet. As I coasted my hover disk silently through the simulated skies of Hundexal's inner world city, I pondered just how weird things were getting now, and how much I really didn't understand them. Pristine alabaster buildings passed me by, temples, parks, and lounging areas below me. Above shone the artificial sun afloat in the planetoid's heart, casting its muted light across the entire scene. I had spent months here in lonely drudgery, observing, watching, waiting for something that didn't seem to quite ever happen, investigating a subtle mystery, perpetrated by unknown suspects for unknown reasons, with pretty much zero clues until a week ago. It had all exploded at once, literally, with the accident at the processing facility, and the string of chaos that followed. It was a shitstorm of scraggery. Nayar tech, warnings that hinted at ancient Vaer cults. How was it all connected? What did it have to do with me? Eek! My thoughts stopped as I floated high above a city block. Someone was headed right for me. He was mere feet away. Another guy in a hover disk, a blank look on his face. I tried dodging aside, but he was already too close. My Atra was too low to boost my reflexes. I braced for impact, the rider's shoulder colliding with my chest. I was surprised to feel nothing, Hoverdisk Man passing right through me. A hologram. But I was off balance, tilting backward, the feel of gravity pulling at me from below. For an instant I fell, twisting on my hoverdisk and flipping downward. With a concentrated effort I regained control, righting myself and using my remaining Atra to secure my feet to the disc. I peeked back and there was no sign of the man who had almost collided with me. Yeah, he must have been a sim, just like the holographic bastard I had chased in the maintenance tunnels. But sims didn't do stuff like that. At least they weren't supposed to. I felt a little shaky as I continued to ride my disc through the air, nearing the tower complex where my quarters were located, my eyes watchful for anyone else zooming through the skies. I arrived without further incident and landed a disc upon the center of my stone balcony. With a thought, it receded back into its more compact form. I placed it into its slot on my belt and walked to the entrance of my personal quarters, the door melting out of the wall. Within the orange-lit interior, a sense of welcome and calm washed over me, the psychic ambiance at work. Even the orange light designed to simulate the familiar light of Mandia, my homeworld's sun. Of course, these quarters looked like nothing I'd ever slept in on dusty Aruvis, with several pieces of comfy, plush furniture, a stone fountain in the middle that continuously gurgled, and holographic art that spun in patterns near the walls. In the adjoining chamber was a bedroom with a small cot and a washtub designed for relaxation and cleanliness. I turned the calming sensations down a notch with a thought. I wasn't here to relax. Not yet. First, I walked over to the room's centerpiece, the fountain. I crouched down, touching my hand against its foundation. A sigil briefly glowed upon its surface, followed by a click as a small compartment opened. There sat the egg-shaped crystal, the same one I had found in the agent's body. I picked it up, sat on the nearby couch, and placed the crystal atop my knees, staring down at it. This was the thing I had to figure out. A mysterious object found growing out of a corpse. Possibly a murder weapon. Again, I gazed at the thing, allowing my connection to the monadic network to come to the forefront. The monad supposedly had info on the whole Scraggin universe. But here, all it gave me was its molecular composition. The thing was basically a simple quartz crystal. Yet the Atra ran across its surface in a regulated pattern. It was obviously tech. I looked further, wanting to see some info on this thing, its designation, a description. But the info was conspicuously absent, like it had been deleted or blocked or... No, none of that. There was something in the monad for the crystal. When I looked at it hard enough, it was almost coming up, a thought at the edge of my awareness. It wouldn't reach my conscious mind because I didn't have the proper rank in the Nyar Harmonium to access it. Yeah, that had to be it. Felt just like some of the other details in this place that I couldn't access due to hierarchy. Scrag. I put the crystal egg back into its compartment and made sure it was shut. Yup. That decided it. I had to get some help. So I stood up and made my way into the adjoining chamber. The portal chair was in the corner of my bedroom. Stiff-backed, made of red-tinted metal. It stood out as the lone uncomfortable thing in this whole place. Because it wasn't designed for comfort. I stepped in and ignored my cot, sitting down in the chair. Immediately I could feel the pulsing from within it, the throb of Atra-infused tech. I sat back fully, took a deep breath in and out, and then closed my eyes. There was an energetic surge from within, a shifting. Colors danced beneath my eyelids, spinning into a kaleidoscope tunnel that grew more vivid the more I concentrated upon it. The lights and colors spun around me as I felt myself journeying down that tunnel, an increasingly bright light visible at its end. I entered, and there was a flash. Then I could see all around me, though what I beheld was not in my bedroom. I sat upon a stone bench on a gardened terrace. In the near distance, a river wound its way through verdant hillocks, where mighty evergreens grew strong and tall. Above it all rose a purple sky adrift with vanilla clouds, streams of Atra surging just beyond them. Everything here had a tingle, a luster not present even in the fine decor of the Nyar city, the light blooming as it touched upon the gilded white construction of the pillar-lined terrace. The local Bardo area, what they would have called an afterlife or spirit world on farm planets. Here, among the ranks of the Nayar, it was just another part of town, a place just out of phase with ordinary physical reality, home to every resident who didn't currently have a body. It was really quite mundane. There was still something magical about it to me, maybe a remnant of having been on a farm world for so long. Just being outside of my body, I felt lighter, liberated from the rules of gravity and the burden of walking around in a bulky meat suit. Everything in the local bardo looked dreamlike, like living in some ideal painting of existence. I took in the scene of the river and the gardens, the distant mansions rising upon hills, the sounds of nearby laughter and chatter. Several robed Nayar lingered in the immediate area, talking quietly among one another. A silver-skinned woman sat upon a stone near the river, humming to herself as she meditated cross-legged. Up in the skies, more folks zipped along, levitating by their own force of will. Nobody I recognized, and not a one turned to acknowledge yet another visitor to their realm. And that was fine. The two people I needed to talk to here were just a thought away. There was a prickly tingle upon my non-physical skin, a sense of being watched. My gaze was drawn upward to the purple skies above. There hovered a grand face, many miles across, its shades drawing from the deep violets and pale whites of the skyscape. It was masculine, solemn, displaying a gentle reserve as its immense golden eyes drifted over the landscape of the spirit realm below, like great searchlights. The Archon Lumavari, in the bardo he truly dwelt, though his body was in the physical, asleep in his huge throne. Here he woke, his mind linked via etheric networks to all the operations in the base, his soul managing the Aychuck flow of this entire galactic sector. I wondered if he could see me, if he noticed me. Why had he not returned to his physical body 2 days ago? Surely Dryfar and the other supervisors would have come here and questioned him on that. When I first arrived for my mission, I'd wondered why they even needed me here, with this immense cosmic being in charge of it all. He was supposed to be intimately connected to the Atra here, responsible for directing every bit of it. Surely Lumavari would know that something was wrong in Kucingkecil. In many ways, he was the planetoid. He was its mind, its soul. Yet he was silent, inactive. Was he too enmeshed in the bliss of the Atric currents? Too detached from us dirty, physical beings to bother? Or was there something else? I met his grand gaze, feeling his spirit observing me as another Atric wave amid his vast ocean. It was soothing in a way, feeling the tingle upon my skin. I focused upward, sending a packet of thoughts his way. There's trouble here. A plot in Kucingkecil. Atra being stolen. Sabotage. Attacks. You need to help. I waited under his beaming eye, hoping for a response. Near a minute later, my own thought packet bounced back to me, echoing in the telepathic noosphere before fading into silence. The giant soul was unresponsive, present yet disconnected. I was about to turn away. I had other business here. But for a moment I paused, gazing back into one of his mile-wide eyes as it scanned over the landscape. Amid the canyons of his grand eye, there was a single blotch, a vicuna in one corner, silver gray amid the gold. My thoughts immediately went to the malicious program Tabalnak had mentioned, unfolding itself, before finalizing its sequence during the cyclical meeting. Was that its work? The Archon's eyes closed, and his immense face melted back into the Atra-filled skies, his awareness drifting elsewhere. I shook off the remainder of that experience. I had things to do, too. I reached inward and sent out a single thought, a call to two presences closely intertwined with my own. They appeared near instantly, stepping out from behind nearby pillars. Rayleigh, who on Aruvis had been my closest companion, my near sister, looked a bit taller than when I had known her in the flesh, though she still wore the same brown-skinned face and a head of full curly hair. I noticed new streaks of pink amid the black, to match her floral-patterned robes. Burge appeared as tall and muscular as ever, though he too had changed a bit, wearing a thick blue beard to complement his hair, his clothing looking like something a military officer would wear. "Sup, Keph," said Burge, waving at me. Rayleigh skipped the words altogether, ran up and gave me a tight hug. Emotions surged through me, the tears flowing just as they would in my body. These were my two oldest friends, who had both taken up residence in my mind after leaving Aruvis. Their bodies dead, but their spirits very much alive. I had almost gotten used to them being there as my constant mental passengers. Ever since going to Hundexel, I had to keep them at a distance, because too much telepathic chatter could very well alert the wrong folks. Now Rayleigh and Burge were residents of the local bardo, at least for the moment. And nope, they're not ready to give us bodies just yet, chirped Rayleigh, reading my thoughts. More lessons required, they say. Gotta raise our virtue rankings, said Burge. Yep, they got us studying the virtues every day, meditating, learning about the Atra. Which I don't mind, by the way. A bit of discipline can be a good thing. Burge had always had a fondness for structure in his life. I guess the Nyar ways suited him. And it's pretty nice in here, continued Rayleigh. Got our own little house overlooking a lake. All the simulated food we could want, and, well, we're learning things about each other we never could while in the body. She threw a wink at Burge. There's less, barriers between people here in the non-physical, he noted, shrugging his wide shoulders. Sometimes it seems there's nothing but barriers out there, I said. Yup, they got you stealth-minding all the time still, I guess, replied Burge. How are things on the outside? Asked Rayleigh. Totally scragged. I did my best to explain, briefly, all the weird Dugga crap that had been happening the past few days, as my discorporate friends listened intently. And that's why I came to see you two today. The bad guys, whoever's been smuggling all that Atra away. The ones who wasted Agent Tabalnak. They're watching everything that happens on the outside. They may not know exactly who I am, but I'm sure they're aware that someone is onto them. Even had a hologram try to body check me today. Oof, replied Rayleigh. But yeah, we've been looking into the Nyar tech a lot since getting off Aruvis. If you know what you're doing, it's pretty easy to make a program to monitor thoughts, track locations, even follow someone around, mostly using nanite cams tied to monadic code. The thing is, I don't think they're watching here, watching you. At least not as closely, I said. Rayleigh got a sly look on her face. I think I know what you're hinting at. You two can send messages off-world here, right? Yup, answered Burge. Easier than you can. All the Naya messages go through the etheric, and that's basically where we're living. So, yeah, I need you to reach out to Z, Demanya, whoever's still on Aruvis. Tell them I need help identifying a very specific item. I sent Burge a mental image of the crystal. Also, keep a lookout for Tabalnak. If he pops up here, that changes everything. Duly noted, said Burge. Rayleigh nodded her head. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Space God Memoirs. Space God is written, performed, and produced by A.M. Arctos. Original musical score by Alpha Colors. Various sound effects created by Industrial Strength Records Incorporated. Please support this podcast by following, rating, and sharing on your favorite social media site. For further info on Space God, its creator, and various other opinions, musings, and thoughts, go to www.spacegodmemoirs.com or follow me on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. If you enjoyed the Space God Memoirs, please consider supporting us by becoming a patron. Check out the Patreon link in our description to learn more.